I'll just kick things off, Jack, by just saying a big, big thank you to you for joining us for an episode of The Responsible Edge this morning. I know you and I met some time ago now,
Yeah.
and seasons have changed, but it's great to have you on the show and really looking forward to the conversation.
Appreciate it. I'm just getting the itinerary back up and I'm good to go. So.
Top man. So Jack, as you know, we begin every show by doing a bit of a deep dive and getting to know our guests and their background. I know you've done some interesting things in your past and your career so far. Start wherever you like. Some guests go back to literally school days and the influences of those, and others start a little bit later. But while you're taking our listeners through your background, if you wouldn't mind just picking out the kind of role that ethical, responsible kind of decision making has played on the career choices and the decisions that you've made, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. I think my kind of intersection, I suppose, into sustainability, I kind of stumbled into this world, I'll be totally honest with you. So I worked in a kind of recognized insurance business, and for about 4 or 5 years, I did a combination of kind of sales and claims. Mm-hmm. And it was that sort of kind of, that opportunity to kind of win work. I'm quite a competitive person. I like that kind of environment, but also helping people as well. And I thought, right, okay, what can I do to sort of combine all of that? And that's where I ended up in recruitment and ultimately sustainability. So my first day, I joined a small kind of engineering recruitment firm in South Wales, tucked away. And they said, great, welcome on board. We're delighted to have you. You're going to do sustainability. And I went, that's great. What is it? And I'll be totally honest. And that's kind of where I suppose my 8-year current sustainability recruitment career started. And I've always felt that everyone, regardless of how small or insignificant you may feel in this kind of wider world, everyone has a small, very individual part to play when it comes to being a responsible business, being ethical, working in that way. And, I'm generally lucky, I suppose, to feel that I can sort of measure the impact that I have with the people that I get to place within these businesses. And that means a lot, and I think that's sort of, I've realized that's my part to play in it. I'm not the most technically gifted individual when it comes to sustainability, but what I am good at is understanding who needs to be working together and who needs to collaborate to actually make the change that I physically can't. So yeah, I think I'm from Wales, living in London. I've met some amazing companies. I've met some credible, impact-driven people, and that's what keeps me going. That's what I love. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Jack, that was a sensational, sensationally efficient introduction to you and yourself. You're not going to get away with it that easy. We're going to dig a little deeper into all these areas. Taking you back to the beginning of your career, then, and you're working in insurance. Like you just talk us through. You mentioned that you realised that working in a sales role and ultimately influencing people and working with people, that was really an area of strength and of focus, if you like. Just talk us through those experiences that you had during that time.
Yeah, I mean, it was an efficient answer, but I'll chew your ear off if you give me the chance. I'm a very people person. That's what kind of gets me out of bed, is kind of meeting people. And I think if I look back at kind of where I started, I'll be quite honest. I didn't go to university. I didn't. I didn't know what I wanted to do and felt that going to university for the sake of it didn't seem the right thing to do. And yeah, I saw this role and I thought, great, it's a great recognized brand. It's speaking to people all the time, even though if the calls are a bit cold and you sometimes don't quite get the reception you want. That was limited, I'll be honest. But that's why I did that, essentially. I wanted to make money. I wanted to find my way in the world. I wanted to get a job and start somewhere. And I had a great 5 years doing it. I really enjoyed my time there, and I think it made me the person I am in a way, kind of being 18 and being thrown into this kind of full-time working environment. It's hard, and I'm seeing all my friends having a great time on student night in Swansea, for example, kind of going out all the time. And as much as I wanted to be a part of that, I also realized that wasn't me, and that's not where I'm meant to be all the time. My role is to work. My role is to I kind of wanted to get on with my life, I suppose. So I wasn't really waiting to hang around. So yeah, that's kind of sort of made me, I suppose, into the person that I am. And then when I look at over the last 8 years in my sustainability recruitment career, I think that's just really kind of honed in everything I sort of wanted to do and now what I get to do every day. You know, yes, I never take for granted the fact I'm in a sales role, and you know, I'm in a business to make money. You know, I think that's always a part of it. And obviously, I think a lot of people in sustainability feel like they have that responsibility as well around the value creation part of sustainability at the moment. However, taking time and getting to know people and getting to know what they do and why they do it, I think that's the bit that I love the most, I suppose. You know, I think there's a lot of recruitment companies that will just read your CV and see the sustainability jargon and the alphabet soup that's all the regulations that everyone has to deal with at the moment. Whereas actually, I like to go a bit back, you know, and kind of what you're doing right now. Why did you get into this? You know, what drives you? What motivates you every day to actually get up and do what is a daunting job, right? You've only got to see the headlines around COP at the moment. You know, all the kind of doom and gloom there is around the fact when we're not hitting targets and there's a climate crisis. And that can be a bit overwhelming for people. And it also takes the fun out of it as well. And I think that's really, really important, is always understanding why you're doing it and what your role is and how you can achieve that ultimately. And I think I get that. And I understand what my part is to play, and I love that. And I think that's made me the person that I am. So yeah, that career, I mean, you know, I'm only early 30s, so I think people will laugh at me when I say I haven't had more than 2-3 weeks off at a time, and I'm a bit tired myself. But you know, I love working. I love getting up, and I love going out there, and I love meeting people, and I love that environment. And I think as long as I never lose that, I'll be very happy. And I think that's what working in an insurance company in a cold call format for about 5 years made me realize, you know. So
it'll certainly make you resilient and robust having your formative experiences in an environment like that. I can recall something similar that I did. I remember one summer, I think I was like 16 or 17, and the BRI in Bristol, the Bristol Royal Infirmary, was attempting to become a foundation trust. And to do that, they needed to get people using the facility to sign up to a voluntary sign up thing to basically put their name to it. And I remember I was given the task of going to pediatrics and spending my summer in pediatric wards trying to get parents to sign up to this thing. And I have to say, that did a similar job in terms of building that. If you can survive that for a summer, being told, you know, left, right, and centre to leave people alone while they're obviously going through very difficult situations, then, you know, it can build a real resilience in you.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, you know, this job, you have to be resilient. There's you know, for every yes, there's 99 no's. You know, and I think being able to deal with that, and also, you know, there are a lot of people who are looking for work, for example, who aren't in jobs at the moment, who really, you know, are desperate, to be honest, to kind of secure something. And you have to kind of take the job out of it sometimes and just treat people like a human being, right? And I think treat others how you want to be treated. That's probably kind of the key value that I have more than anything else. And that authenticity side of it is like, I don't really matter where you are in a business, the size of person you are, you know, the role that you have. I want to treat you like a human being first and foremost, you know. And I think that's what I learned is kind of, I got a lot of no's, but I got a lot of nice no's, you know, and people dealt with me in the right way. And that made me realize, okay, fine, you're going to get no's. It's going to be tough. It is tough. You know, I didn't have these bags under my eyes when I was 18, that's for sure. But ultimately, you know, it's rewarding. And I think you've got to savor those rewarding moments more than anything else. Definitely.
Jack, can I pick you up on that? In terms of you very openly suggested that, and I think that's brilliant, that description of your first role in recruitment, and somebody turned around and said, well, you're going to be doing sustainability. You said, what's that? Having been introduced to, and we're using generalizations here, but essentially the sustainability agenda, and then obviously making it a core part of your career over the last 8 years, like, have you found yourself like adopting the kind of the issues, if you like, around sustainability that have enabled you perhaps to be even more resilient and even more sort of confident, if you like, in the impact and the role that you have, in spite of the no's that you still receive in the role?
Yeah, sustainability is a very technical space, right? And we don't take that for granted. And even 8 years later, I still have this massive case of imposter syndrome sometimes. What am I doing here? I'm in a room full of CSOs somewhere who are talking around regulations, and I'm sat there and I'm going, I know what you're all talking about and I understand this, but I still feel like sometimes I shouldn't be in the room, and there's always a bit of that. I mean, what I've kind of realized is that the change in sustainability, I suppose, is because it is a fundamental part of my life, because it's fundamental in every facet of what a company should be doing anyway. I think the biggest difference I've seen over the 8 years is when I started in the sustainability roles that I would place, they were very much hiring because it was project. Mm-hmm. We have this to do around sustainability. We have this to do around sustainability. And it was very kind of individual hiring, I would say, probably. Now it's HR, marketing, communication, operational sides of businesses, finance side of businesses. They are all thinking about how this intertwines into sustainability, into ESG. And it's becoming it's becoming their life. It's becoming an absolute integral part of what they do. And I kind of then take that into my own kind of personal beliefs as well, I suppose, and kind of understand what role I'm playing. And that's why, when our company decided to kind of start measuring our own carbon footprint, understanding what we're doing, I wanted to play an active role in that, and it's kind of those little switches, I suppose, like cycling to work and all this kind of stuff, which, I understand my role is very, very limited and very, very small in what I can do. But as long as I'm doing it, I have that sense of sort of pride and satisfaction in that as well, which I think is really important. So yeah, that's the biggest challenge I've seen, and probably the biggest growth area of sustainability. And I've been really lucky to be on that wave as well, which is great.
Jack, it's fascinating. I think that coming back to a point that you raised earlier, where that appreciation and understanding that regardless of the significance of the role that we're all playing with, in both of ourselves individually, but equally the organizations that we work for, we are still contributing, either positively or negatively. So we can make a choice about that. I think that's a really, really compelling point. Let me talk to you about the rest of your career, and where you see things. I think this is always an interesting question to ask. When you get to the end of your career and you're looking back on what you've done, what do you want to be able to say about what you did?
I understand my role is connecting people, and I want to look back and see some of the impact that these companies have through their sustainability agenda and say, I put those people there. I kind of, I didn't do it, but I connected them. And I think that's really important to me. And I love kind of seeing placements, for example, who then go out to win awards or join award-winning teams, for example, and kind of have this impact and have this effect. And I think that's the most satisfaction part of my role, and I think that's kind of what I want to look back on and go, my part was small, but I did play a part, and that's kind of, I don't really look back, and I'm not this kind of person that sort of measures success in kind of a KPI or a data. Obviously you can look at big sales and do well, fantastic, but when I look back, I'm not going to measure what I did, I suppose, in data and numbers. I want to look back and I want to visualize and I want to actually see the impact I've had, I suppose, in that. And that is where I love the fact that I work in sustainability, and why I think I'd struggle to work in any other environment, because it's one of those environments where you can actually measure the impact. You can visibly see what people are doing and some of the initiatives that they're running. So I just want that personal satisfaction, I suppose, when I retire, just to look back and go, yeah, I played my role. That's all that matters to me.
And Jack, on that, and by the way, I think that's a very kind of, there's a humility to what you've just described, which I think is really refreshing to hear. But equally, the putting of people together is such a core part of enabling innovation, development, growth. So I wouldn't underplay it. Would be my response. Perhaps you won't be able to for commercial reasons, but are there any particular examples in your career so far of people that you've worked with, people that you've connected people to companies that, due to what's gone on to happen, you've been particularly proud of?
I think there's a couple of kind of, in the kind of world that I do within consultancy, for example, that's kind of the world I've sort of always been in within sustainability, is helping these consultancies, whether they be, the large recognized businesses that everyone would know, the SMEs, or even kind of the amount of innovative startups that we're working with at the moment who are really trying to make a difference, I think is great. There's a couple of examples of working with international development consultancies, for example, who are obviously trying to unlock this finance. And there was one where, well, I think this one company, there were two projects that they were doing which just wowed me, and I loved being a part of. The first one was they were working on an accelerator fund to help. It was based in Africa, this accelerator fund, and it was basically to help innovative entrepreneurs in climate tech who just didn't have the resources around capital or the business acumen to actually launch a business. And this accelerator program was giving them not just the funding, but the expertise to actually build those. So it was really kind of on the ground working with entrepreneurs who really care about what they're doing and trying to make a difference with the tech that they were able to realize. And then the other one was that.
And Jack, sorry to interrupt you, but is the crucial thing there that this wasn't an accelerator for climate tech that was based in Europe or the US or basically the Northern Hemisphere? This was an accelerator that was designed for African-based entrepreneurs in order to access this kind of support. That's the key point.
Absolutely. I think it's that kind of, sustainability had hubs, I suppose, for years, and it's now global, which is great. And there are some incredible minds in areas that just don't have access to funds, don't have access to the networks, the right people, and just being able to kind of find people who want to go on the ground. They want to be there. They want to be in these, underdeveloped areas, essentially, to actually say, you deserve to have just as much opportunity as anyone who's based in London. And I think that's definitely something that I've enjoyed kind of growing on my career, by going from this kind of very project companies based in kind of the UK to this kind of global role, really helping people, kind of covering the global south just as much, because there's so much talent there that just don't quite have the opportunities yet. And, the other one, as I was mentioning there, was a conservation fund set up by an international development company for the Amazon rainforest and white noises. So, when you go to bed, right, and you kind of listen to, you listen to jungle sounds, or you listen to the water, for example. Basically, if you listen, Taylor Swift gets royalties, right, for every song she listens to. The Amazon doesn't when you listen to those noises at night. So what they did is actually set up a fund around royalties when you're listening to the Amazon rainforest at night, when you're kind of in bed. And all the money that was going from those royalties were going back into reforestation projects in the area. And that was just so cool. And I think just kind of ringing people and telling them about it, hopefully you can hear it and kind of, the excitement I have about it. I think being so invested in that means it's just such an easier sell. It's so easy to ring people and get people invested in it because they can actually measure the impact, as we talked about. So I think those are probably two of the ones that kind of stand out in my recent career for sure, about kind of, there are obviously some of the largest companies that we've worked with, and we've put individuals in, and we've kind of worked with quite disruptive companies within the space as well, kind of, if you look at oil and gas, for example, it's a tough one as a sustainability professional, an ethical professional, to go, should we be working with those companies? But if you get the right people in those companies who are doing that work for the right reason and want to genuinely make a difference, then we should play a part in that as well. So it's really cool sometimes, but sustainability can also be not as, there aren't always these sexy roles out there, unfortunately. But it's just as important that we put the right people in all these roles, for sure.
It's super compelling, Jack, and I think it really comes across as you've clearly laid out there, that the passion, if you like, enthusiasm that you have for the impact of the work that you're doing, which is fantastic and really comes through. I know we're going to come on and talk about this particular article that we picked out from the Institute of Sustainable Studies from this year, but I just wanted to get your take before we move on to that. We recently did a show with the CIOB, and we were talking about the green skills gap. As somebody clearly in the know, I'd love to get your comment on the green skills gap and what impact it's had or is having on the work that you're doing.
I sort of look at it as a different lens when you kind of say green skills gap. There is a gap for sure. There isn't unlimited talent within the sustainability space, and what we have seen over the years is kind of people with, let's say, 60-70% of a particular role, coming in and doing those roles and learning on the job, which I think is very important. But I actually think the biggest gap in sustainability or green skills as a whole is actually the softer skills of it. I think if you look at businesses at the moment, that you can get people to do the regulatory side of a role. You can get people to do reporting. They can come from different backgrounds, like auditing, for example, But actually, the people who can sell sustainability and unlock the value part of it and actually speak to, let's say, the CFO of a large business who, quite frankly, there isn't an appetite to do it, and kind of saying, what's in it for me? And actually getting people invested. That is, in my opinion, the biggest skills gap within sustainability at the moment, because there is definitely, as I've said, everyone needs to get on board. Everyone needs to realize what their role is and the part they play, regardless of how little or big that may be. And having those communication skills to actually be able to unlock that and engage with stakeholders, and engage with investors, and engage with C-suite to get involved around sustainability, that is the gap. And that's the hardest thing to find at the moment, in my opinion. Because there are a lot of people who can do sustainability reporting if that's what you need. But what's next? And people who understand that and can take people on that journey, that is the gap, in my opinion.
And out of interest, Jack, because that's fascinating and very much pulls into the conversation that I had with Amanda a week or so ago. But what's the solution to that?
I think the solution is sustainability, businesses, people, teams, whatever. If you're playing a role in that, is to get people on the journey with you and get people realizing what their role is and what that looks like. And I personally think that, reporting and regulation is a necessary evil for all businesses to do, because it will then, once they're comfortable reporting and they understand the value and the data and the KPIs around it, they'll understand what they can do next and the value they can create once they've got that baseline in place. But ultimately, I know that because I do this job. The rest of the world, there's a bit of a PR problem, I think, when it comes to reporting at the moment. And if you're investors or you're senior people in businesses and you look at it and go, oh, why do we have to do that? It's going to cost me this. And, it's just a bit of negativity around it, right? And I think people who get excited by it and can take people on a journey and show people actually the value that sustainability can create, whether it be reporting, whether it be regulatory, that I think is the most important thing that people can do. And I think that's what sustainability teams and partners have a responsibility to do within their firms, is to just be the loudest people in the room, in my opinion, because the more you talk about it, the more you'll get people interested, the more they'll want to get on the journey with you. And I think that's the key thing.
Fascinating. Thank you for sort of segueing into the skills gap and talking me through that. We could carry on, and I could literally just ask you about you and your views of the world as for the rest of the show. But if we can move now on to introducing the article by, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but Bronner Logan in the Institute of Sustainability Studies. I think it was March 2024. Would you mind just providing our listeners with perhaps just an overview of what the article covers, and then perhaps just pick out whatever the most interesting points were for you?
Yeah, so the article itself is kind of focused on sustainability recruitment, and it's kind of integrating sustainability into your talent acquisition strategy. So again, as I talked earlier, when sustainability is becoming business critical, it's not projects anymore, and businesses are working in a more ethical, sustainable way. That has to come into all facets of your business, and that includes talent and attracting talent, but also then retention and development of talent as well. So the article kind of makes a few interesting points, I suppose, around kind of the value of sustainability recruitment and having that strategy and the core part that plays within your talent strategy. And they've kind of broken it down into a few areas. So, things like embedding sustainability values, for example, and promoting sustainable practices within the workplace. I mean, we just talked about that slightly, and how there's a responsibility to be slightly louder and have a bit more of a kind of communications attitude, I suppose, around sustainability. But a lot of the stuff that it comes back to is essentially, how do we engage people? How do we engage people around sustainability? How do we promote it? How do we showcase? There's a lot of companies that have kind of an idea, I suppose, around sustainability and what they need to do, but actually, how do we take people on a journey? And it's that starting point. I think that's where the article is saying, it's kind of, where do you start? That's the key thing. I just need to put the dog back in the bed. So I'm sorry.
No, don't worry, Jack. Don't worry, go for it.
Sorry. There we are.
No, I love it. We've always got time for a little. I've got a very, very sleepy Stevie just lying on me here. So
yeah, unfortunately, my dog is on strict bed rest and doesn't quite understand what that means. Unfortunately, yeah. So just got to keep reminding him. So I apologize about that. But yeah, so I think the kind of the article makes some really, really interesting points. But I think the key bit for me was definitely there's a lot of ideas, I suppose, and there's a lot of things we can do, but where do you start? And I think that's where a lot of companies are at the moment.
And out of interest, Jack, in fact, I've got two questions. I'm going to start with this question, then we'll go back to talk about communications, because I think that came up in your previous response about, looking at the green skills gap as well. But on that point, in your estimation, where should an organization start? Like what would be the starting point for thinking, right, we now want to, take a more holistic view of our recruitment strategy, factoring in sustainability and sustainability values, if you like. What do they do?
Yeah, it can be quite overwhelming, to be honest. And I think when there's such a big part to play, where do you start is kind of really, really important. I think ultimately where you start is just by getting curious and speaking to people within the space, speaking to people who have been there and done it, and also understanding there's no right formula for it either. You can't Google this and just say, how do I get sustainability into my talent strategy? There's no one article that's going to basically tell you how to do it. So I think firstly, it's having the willingness and the ambition and actually the curiosity to meet people and actually understand how other companies have done it. I think there's so many companies doing so many different things, and some bits are right, some bits aren't. But actually, it's that collaboration bit and the fact that people aren't really sharing what they're doing. And I think, that's why companies find it quite overwhelming and struggle with where to start, because they want to know, they want to understand, and people are kind of keeping it quite isolated, to be honest. So I think that's the starting point, is just get that level of curiosity and collaboration with other businesses to understand, right, we're not perfect, but what did you do? How can we kind of learn and develop that? And then ultimately, I think it's, the other thing for me is there are people within businesses that really care about this, but potentially because of their role and what they're doing, don't feel like they have the opportunity to talk about it or potentially put their hand up and say, I want to get involved in sustainability. And I think that will help then when it comes to further retention and development that we talked around. If you're giving people the opportunity to put their hand up and say, I want to get involved and I've got ideas, sometimes you don't have to. Talent strategies are great and recruitment are great, and it's what keeps the lights on, obviously, for me. But ultimately, before you do that, you should really exhaust and kind of look internally and understand the skill sets that you do have and people that want to get involved. And I think that's what people think. Sometimes recruitment isn't the answer. Not all the time. Normally it can be, don't get me wrong. But, I think that willingness to look internally is really, really important.
That's fascinating, Jack. And again, comes back to a communications issue, or not issue, but opportunity to say, let's communicate and engage with our current employees. Let's discover who really has a passion and enthusiasm for these things, and let's start building our sort of sustainability around them and around a feedback loop and engagement that allows them to take ownership of it. We keep talking, Jack. It's fascinating. Keep talking to people, and you've already alluded to it in the conversation today about, the need for us to sort of view sustainability in the workplace as literally a part of every employee's role. And the question of like, how do you encourage and ultimately convince everyone to get on board with that? Out of interest, in your experience, like, can you give us some examples of any companies that you've worked with that you think have done that particularly well?
Yeah, I think, I think normally it kind of starts in the finance world. That's normally kind of where it begins. You start to incentivize, then it kind of naturally sort of trickles down, I suppose, into the rest of the world. And sustainability initiatives are quite hard to define sometimes, and how companies engage employees and how they do it. The easiest way to look at it is obviously bonus related. That's where it normally starts. If you really want to get people involved, the first thing they're thinking about sometimes is their pockets, unfortunately. And, so what we have seen is kind of bonuses and company success targeted around their sustainability goals and initiatives, the amount of companies that are now backed by private equity, for example, there are sustainability targets tied into all of those. So it's so important that everyone plays their part, because ultimately that leads to more business growth, it leads to business success and the wider strategy being implemented as well. So I think it's hard for me to kind of give exact, I suppose, kind of examples of what companies are doing, because we place the people who care. So we sort of don't have to kind of incentivize them already. They understand why it is, and I think, but ultimately, to engage employees, you've got to start with the communication angle. So we go back to it, but you've got to start somewhere. And then ultimately, when people get more involved, you can start tying incentives and initiatives around that as well.
Is there also something, Jack, that and I know we're talking about a very hypothetical scenario here, where essentially you've got a hypothetical business that's almost got like a blank sheet of paper when it comes to sustainability. I know there won't be any out there now, but let's say that they do. The first thing you need to do is understand, well, what are our values when it comes to sustainability? And then from a recruitment perspective, the next step is to then find other people that you bring in that clearly match with those values. Is the key to being clear about your own values so that you attract those that share those values with you?
Massively. I think what's really refreshing in the sustainability world at the moment when we speak to companies is they're aware that they don't particularly want to be progressive at the moment. And I think that's really important from a kind of values driven business, is understanding actually why you're hiring in the first place and why you need these people. And there's loads of different factors for why you need to hire sustainability talent. It can be because you want to and the company are asking for it, but it can be more external factors as well, kind of understand, trying to win work, for example. You need sustainability professionals. They want purpose-driven businesses. They want purpose-driven collaborations, so therefore you need to be doing what your partners want to do as well. So actually, I think the value side of it is fantastic. And I think it's really important that companies are quite honest with what they want to achieve when it comes to sustainability over the next couple of years. There's a lot of regulatory pressure coming all over the world. There's, like I said, there's a different reporting jargon every week at the moment. It's kind of what it feels like. And companies, all they need at the moment is, how do we get our heads around this? How do we report? What do we need to report? And that can create just as much impact for a company as anything else. Because then ultimately, the sustainability world, there are some amazing jobs. You look at everything around nature-based solutions. You look at all the carbon technologies that are kind of coming out, climate tech. So much cool stuff going on at the moment. But those companies are progressive for a reason, and there are companies that just want to be sustainable for a minute, and that's also okay. So I think it's very good for companies to be quite honest with where they are.
And the importance there, Jack, and again, excuse my absolute naivety when it comes to the recruitment side of things, is that you need to be clear so that the expectations of those that you're recruiting are aligned with the reality of the job and of the likely experience they're going to have. If, for example, we as an organization perhaps do have longer term intentions to embed sustainability as more of a core and fundamental level, but for now we just need to stay afloat with this thing.
100%. Companies want to do it, but they're not quite ready to do it. And I think, and that's also absolutely fine. And I think if you want, what you need is someone who's kind of excited by that journey, who wants, sustainability professionals love measuring impact more than I do. They absolutely love it. And that's what's really important to them, is this company can be great. It can do some amazing things around sustainability, but you don't go from A to Z, you go from A to B, right? And I think that's what people forget sometimes. People want to run while they're walking. And that's where companies need to have that real clarity, especially, and that starts with job descriptions. That starts with what they're talking about sustainability on their website. All companies now will have a sustainability or ESG tab on their website, which tells you kind of what they've done. That's where it starts. It starts with the research. It starts with that background of where you are as a business. And then that has to carry through the whole interview process. You're trying to sell your company. You're trying to sell a job. We understand you need to kind of add glitter to this process to make it be appealing to people. But no one wants to start a job and 3 weeks later realize this is absolutely not what I interviewed for. There's nothing worse. So that clarity has to go through the whole process for sure.
And Jack, would it be, obviously drawing it slightly to obviously highlighting the work that we're doing at the Anti-Greenwash Charter, but would you suggest that what you've just described, the instance of essentially experiencing greenwashing as a prospective employee of a company and being sold down the river, if you like, in terms of the credentials of the company, and then finding out that that's not the case. How prevalent is that in your expectation?
It happens more than I'd like, to be totally honest, but because I've done it for so long now, I'm quite confident, I suppose, that I can kind of see it for what it is, and I think that's important. I think I tell companies all the time, I am an extension of you into the market. That's essentially what I am. We're partnering up in recruitment. I'm not just finding people. I'm an extension of you. I am selling your company. I need to know where you are. I need to know exactly, because ultimately I don't want to sell a dream to someone as well if this isn't the case. And I think that's really, really important. So treating people as partners, being authentic with people and just being quite honest, I think is just so important. And yeah, unfortunately, it still does happen. But I think companies maybe overthink it sometimes and say we need to be looking like we're doing actually more than what we are. Well, just be honest, you're not quite there yet. That's fine. No one is. You look at all the companies that set their science-based targets years ago, for example, they're all realizing now some of those aren't fit for purpose, and they're remonitoring and they're looking at what they can do different. There's no right answer. There's no right formula here. And I think it's just understanding where you are with it is just so important.
And Jack, just touching on that, because that was a brilliant response and certainly rings true to the work that we're doing at the Charter. But in the other kind of major trend, if you like, in the realms of sustainability communications is obviously this notion of green hushing, and that fear of being being found or being suggested that you are greenwashing leads to organizations choosing to essentially withhold and not share their sustainability credentials. Has that been prevalent and relevant within the work that you do as well?
We've certainly seen it. And, I think there is so much scrutiny on sustainability at the moment that companies are slightly afraid to do anything with it, and that is such a shame, in my opinion, because companies feel like they have to do something drastic to be seen as a sustainable business. It's really not. As I said, A to B, you've got to chip away at it. And just talking actually around the little things that you're doing, that will naturally get people more involved in the business as well. They'll see something small and cool and think, yeah, I can play a part in that, not this just huge target setting, for example. So I do feel that there is a lot of it. You just got to look around things like, the voluntary carbon markets, for example, and the fact that's unregulated at the moment. Companies have a lot of capital that they would like to put into offset projects, for example, but because those projects are so scrutinized because they're not regulated, companies are afraid to do it. And when they do announce something, yeah, LinkedIn goes nuts. It's one of those, you get everyone out of the woodwork claiming, crediting, So, for example, I have seen companies that have been set up over the last couple of years that actually verify these claims. They're kind of they're sort of like a broker around kind of, let's take a massive Unilever, for example, who say they want to do something around sustainability and say, this product will do X for us. This company will go, well, let's prove it, for example. So we're seeing more stuff like that come out as well. But there's definitely, green hushing is very prevalent at the moment, for sure.
It's really interesting to hear it, the role that, if you like, is playing. And presumably, what impact does that have from a recruitment perspective? Like, does that impact the work that you're doing in terms of, not being able to, if you can't tease out from the organizations that you're working with exactly, the impact that they're having and the things that they're doing from a sustainability perspective, presumably that makes it harder for you to then communicate the opportunity to possible candidates. Have I just massively oversimplified it? Or
You've definitely done a good job of that, for sure. I mean, you're completely right. It's, how can you sell? You got to sell the whole story, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's so important. And it does make life more difficult sometimes when you don't quite get to see that. I appreciate the company tell me it. I don't need anything ultimately, but ultimately I need to know what this person really is going to care about. And it is the reason there's a skills gap at the moment is because every company is trying to hire within sustainability or ESG in some shape or form at the moment, right? How do you stand out? How do you make yourself different to the 5 other interviews that one potential candidate is having? the only way you do that is by telling them everything and killing them with content in a way, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. I'd rather have more stuff to read about a company than less, and I think companies forget that sometimes, forget the headlines. It's great to know the headlines, but go underneath a little bit further as well.
It's super interesting. I couldn't agree more, Jack. And I think I know it's in a different context, but I think it's still relevant within this, essentially it's still about connecting with an audience and ultimately trying to communicate with them in a way that convinces them to take action. We talked to our signatories at the Charter about the liberating, disarming nature of in our world creating a green claims policy, and ultimately having, for example, a section in there where you detail all of the areas where you as an organization are not sustainable, and ultimately what you're trying to do to address those sustainability issues, and the impact that then has in enabling you to then confidently communicate the things that you are doing and the impact that you are having. That has got to be the starting point, if you like, for building a mutually beneficial, honest, open, dialogue and relationship with a prospective new recruit. Is that, if I oversimplified that again, or is that a fair sort of approach, do you think, that organizations?
No, it's definitely a fair approach. I mean, it's, sustainability for me is all about partnerships and collaboration, and it's about, collectively working together to hit these large goals and these large targets. And I think I personally love working with companies that are just so honest with me and very authentic about where they are. I think that makes them a really good partner for me sometimes. And candidates, they love that. They feed off that. And also sustainability people, they don't necessarily see that as kind of a daunting challenge. They see it as, it's creative and it's something that I can really shape and drive and grow and have an impact. It's the whole glass half full analogy, right? And that's kind of how you've got to see sustainability sometimes. Is this is obviously a lot of work to do. There's climate fatigue, there's climate anxiety in the world at the moment. It's daunting, right? But we've all got to start somewhere. And actually, I think that, that authenticity and honesty is just so key across all levels, regardless of whether they're a junior, whether they're a senior sustainability person. It doesn't really matter. Give them the facts.
And it presumably creates, if you are prepared to approach things in that way with that kind of degree of honesty and openness, it's going to attract the innovators. It's going to create the creatives that we need. We don't just need people going in thinking, well, this is a compliance and reporting job that I'm doing here, and that ultimately I know the organization is absolutely fantastic from all the materials, et cetera, that I've received. And all I'm going in to do is basically just do the checks. We want people to turn around and go, no, we're not where we want to be. Somebody used this term the other day, Jack, that I would love to share with you and get your take on it. We were having a conversation. I can't remember which guest it was now, but we were having a conversation and we were looking. There was an article from Deloitte that said that in 2024, that 47 of the top 100 FTSE 100 companies have had restatements regarding their ESG credentials. And of that, I think it was 60% of those were due to changes in methodology. And I think it was 30% due to error. And it's and the guest at the time described it, just said, it's just clumsy. We're in the clumsy phase. And I thought, what an incredibly real term to use to describe where we're at. And I know no organization is going to get to that stage, but being able to have that kind of dialogue with a prospective recruit to say, look, we are in the clumsy stage. We're going to get some of this stuff wrong. We're not going to get it right all the time, but we want you to come on and be part of improving standards, of making things better and getting to where we want to get to. Is that, what do you think of the use of the term clumsy in that?
I love it. I'm a clumsy individual, so I love it. That's great. No, I really think the only way you can bring solutions to the table is if you've made mistakes, right? And that ability and that freedom to make mistakes, I think, is something that, you talk about green hushing and greenwashing and all things like that. But the reason they're so scrutinized all the time is that's why people, make mistakes sometimes, because there is so scrutinized and there isn't that freedom to actually do it. So I think, to answer your question, the reason why people the reason why people need to hire sustainability professionals is to create solutions. And, you need to be a solutions orientated person to be a sustainability professional, in my opinion. But actually, break a few eggs, right? And I think that's so important. So I love the term, the clumsy stage. I think that's great. And I love people. I love people who have awareness of that as well. I love people that just own who they are and the humanistic side of who they are. I think it's so important, and if companies share that a bit more as well, I think that's such a refreshing thing. I love it. So yeah.
Jack, brilliant stuff. I'm pleased that you concur on the clumsy. We want to get clumsy more widely adopted, and it's okay to be clumsy at this stage. It's okay. We're all pressing forward and ultimately trying to realize a collective outcome here. We've done a lot of our conversation. We are coming towards the end, but we've done a lot of our conversation being focused on from an organizational perspective and looking at essentially some of the key considerations around sustainability recruitment. Thinking about from a candidate point of view, I would just love for you to give us a flavor and a bit of an update on kind of how things have developed over the course of your career. You mentioned the 8-year career. Like, what changes have you seen in terms of the candidate profile, in terms of the pain points, the considerations, et cetera, that go into who you're working with now?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is it's kind of similar to what business is doing, from going projects to business critical. I think that is the biggest change I've seen for sustainability professionals, who essentially for years, in my opinion, was seen as very niche. And look, it's still a bit of a niche sector with some of the subplots that go out of sustainability, as we mentioned, climate tech and carbon capture storage and all the incredible stuff like that. But what we are just seeing, in my opinion, is candidates just need to be as horizontal, as holistic as possible in their approach to sustainability at the moment. And that's why I come back to the skills gaps is all around the softer skills as well, because sustainability professionals can do the reporting, but they're actually spending a lot of time trying to convince people and demonstrate the value creation of sustainability at the moment. And those softer skills, being able to influence, that is what sustainability professionals are having to learn a lot more at the moment, because, the economy's tough, right? Everything is more expensive. Prices are going up across the board. And then when someone's telling you you've got to do this, why? Why do I need, why do I need to spend this? Why do I need to do this? What is so important about this? And that's where sustainability professionals are spending all their time at the moment, trying to convince people why we still need to do it. And that's the biggest change I've seen. It's getting better. We're still not there, but it's definitely going the right way. And I'm excited for what the next 5 years looks like for sustainability professionals and candidates alike. I think it's going to be some really cool jobs, and I'm excited to see people do well, for sure.
Jack, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, look, as expected, we've absolutely rattled through this morning's conversation. I know we've just literally scratched the surface when it comes to looking into this topic. It's been really interesting. We've definitely not had anybody working in the recruitment world, I think, on the show previously, and we've spoken about some of these issues, but to hear it from the kind of source, if you like, and to get some clarification on this, it's been absolutely fantastic and really, really useful, I think, for our listeners out there thinking about their recruitment strategies. To conclude the show, though, this morning, I'm going to ask you the magic wand question. So, Jack, if we were to hand you a magic wand and you could change one thing about the commercial world this instant, what would that one thing be?
It would definitely be just people getting it, I suppose. I think it's just get rid of all the preconceptions and the negativity around sustainability and regulation and what it needs to do, and people just get it and they want to do it. And I think if I could wave a magic wand, it wouldn't be anything you'd see physically. It would be a behavior change that I would love to kind of implement across the corporate world. Is there's still a what's in it for us and why do we need to do this? And I just want people to snap out of that attitude and snap out of that mentality and just go, let's do it. Let's get on with it. It's going to cost us money. Great. Let's just do it because it's the right thing to do. And I think that's the magic wand.
Oh, a great magic wand. This magic wand's had quite the use over episode 63, Jack. But I think that's a great magic wand request. Out of interest, just final question on this. You mentioned, factoring into what you've just said, you mentioned about how, you do have organizations that come to you and they're very upfront about the fact that we're not doing this to be progressive. We're doing this in order to essentially address a sort of short-term concern that we have around X, Y, or Z. Mm-hmm. What percentage would you say of companies that you work with fall into that group, if you like, compared to we're thinking long-term, we're thinking about business efficiency, we're thinking about protecting ourselves from risk, etc., and we're also looking to embed sustainability more fundamentally?
I would say within my kind of professional services world, I would probably say around 50-50 at the moment. I think there's there are a lot of progressive companies who we can talk about and say, look what they're doing and some of the amazing work they're doing, and people want to get involved in those. But there are a lot of companies who are just at the start of their journey as well. There's so many, 50, 100 people companies that are now 1,000 people in the short space of a very few years, and all of a sudden this was not a problem for them 2-3 years ago. And now it is. And unfortunately, that's the behavior change piece that I've said the word problem there, because that's unfortunately how they see it. But that's fine. That's fine. You've got to start somewhere, as you mentioned. So I'd probably say about 50-50 at the moment. And I wouldn't be surprised if that favors more to the lack of progressive companies than it would be the progressive ones for the minute. Because I would say when we had the great job boom in sustainability around 2021, 2022, that was all the progressive work. That was, we've got our science-based targets, we've got some kind of strategy, we're looking to build on it. And then the tidal wave of regulation came in, and it seems like all the fun and all the strategic work just kind of stopped for a minute. And that's fine. In the 8 years of sustainability, it goes in waves, right? 1 minute it's great and it's progressive, the next it's quiet. It's never going to be quiet again. And that's the great change. But ultimately the jobs are different. And as long as companies, as we go back to, are very honest about what they need and what this person has to do and what the help is they need, we'll get to the progressive stuff. We just it's going to take time, and we just got to be patient.
Jack, what a brilliant way to end. That's a real call to arms, if you like, which I think is fantastic. Jack, it's been an absolute delight having you on. Thank you so much
for having me
this morning. It's been great fun.
Great. Thanks, Charlie. Appreciate it.